Good day, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin in Yukon, where the First Nation of Nacho, Nyak in Mayo has filed a receivership application against Victoria Gold, the company responsible for a cyanide spill on its traditional territory. The First Nation told reporters on Wednesday the application was filed with the Yukon Supreme Court. Calls for a third party to take over management of the company and ensure environmental protections are put in place. Yukon government likewise filed a receivership application with the Ontario courts on Tuesday. The First Nation says it supports the government's application. Victoria Gold said in a press release it fully intends to fight the government's application. In late June, the mine's heap leach facility experienced an equipment failure, causing cyanide and other contaminants to be spilled into the surrounding environment.
A change in control at the site is desperately required. This action in court is the only way that we can ensure the steps necessary to mitigate this disaster are being taken.
Thousands are on the move, fleeing a fire near Bunbonabee Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. An out-of-control wildfire is growing so fast that the Canadian Armed Forces have been called in to help get people out of the nation in a hurry. According to the Canadian Armed Forces, the first of 4 Hercules aircraft arrived on Wednesday afternoon, and evacuations are ongoing. The fire, 5,700 hectares in size, was 10 kilometers south of the Bunbonabee Cree Nation. The Canadian Red Cross says they are working with the Canadian Armed Forces to coordinate air transportation out of the community. The Red Cross is also providing evacuated community members with lodging, food, and personal items such as hygiene kits, diapers, and formula. The organization is also assisting 6 other First Nations in Manitoba currently under evacuation. Manitoba says there are currently 71 active wildfires in the province. According to the latest data from Indigenous Services Canada, more than 2,500 people are currently evacuated from First Nations, although that number will grow when figures are updated later in the day. Another 22 First Nations, mostly in British Columbia, are also currently impacted by wildfires. If you've been impacted by wildfire this season, we'd like to hear from you. Here's how you can continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, you can go to our website. That's aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The Nisitchewayasik Cree Nation in northern Manitoba is calling on the province to put an end to a 12-year agreement on Manitoba Métis harvesting rights. The First Nation says the Métis have no claim to hunting rights on their traditional territory. Reporter Sierra Bettens has more.
The limits of Métis harvesting rights are being tested and called into question by a First Nation in northern Manitoba. In a letter dated August 2nd, obtained by the Winnipeg Free Press, the Nisitchewayasik Cree Nation asked the province to terminate a 2012 harvesting agreement between the provincial government and the Manitoba Métis Federation. The First Nation argues Métis cannot exercise their harvesting rights on NCN's traditional land they say overlaps with the MMF's harvesting zone. The community, located over 800 kilometers from Winnipeg, is currently under partial evacuation due to wildfires. NCN Chief Angela Levasseur did not respond to APTN's interview request by airtime. Will Gooden, the MMF's Minister of Housing and Property Management, disagreed with the letter.
Each other, and it's kind of sad that this has happened at this point when we need to be working together to show how Indigenous peoples, which includes Métis, that we are conservation minded, that we do want to protect the future.
The 2012 application, referenced in the letter, establishes the zones where Red River Métis can exercise their harvesting rights in Manitoba. However, NCN says they weren't consulted before the agreement was put into force in 2012. The First Nation claims there is no historic Métis community at Nelson House in a manner that is consistent with the Pauli test. The Supreme Court case that informs the test is often used to determine the application of Métis rights. Gooden, however, questions the letter's interpretation of the test and definition of a community.
Community is a word that's can be used in many different ways. Was there a Métis community in that area? Absolutely. Was there Métis, Red River Métis who used the area to harvest? 100%. But at the end of the day, I think what we're going to be getting at is how there's not a hierarchy of rights in the Constitution.
In a written statement to APTN, Jamie Moses, Minister of Economic Development, Trades and Natural Resources, said they are open to meeting with the NCN and the MMF and are looking at ways to address their concerns. Gooden says the MMF hopes to sit down with NCN and the province to chart a way forward. As of Monday, Chief Levasseur told the Winnipeg Free Press she'd not heard back from the province. Sierra Buttons, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Métis Nation Saskatchewan is calling on the provincial and federal governments to stop the Fission Uranium Corp PLS uranium mine from going forward. The mine is proposed for Patterson Lake, located almost 200 kilometers north of La Loche. The lake is significant to the Métis for hunting, fishing, and trapping. M&S said in a press release that mineral exploration has already damaged the area, with Métis commercial fishing completely wiped out in Patterson Lake. Regional Director of M&S Northern Region 2, Leonard Montgrand, says they offered to collaborate with Fission, but the company rejected all efforts. M&S says they recently found out that the provincial government has approved an exploration program for the company, which will use heavy machinery, have 100 drill holes made in Patterson Lake, and create 45 kilometers of trail. Vice President Michelle Leclerc says if Métis rights under Section 35 are to be valued, governments must be willing to reject projects that harm Métis people. And in a statement to APTN News, the CEO of Fission Uranium said their approach to the project includes a strong focus on environmental stewardship and building mutually beneficial relationships with Métis and First Nations. The statement says the company has had ongoing engagement and executed numerous agreements with Métis and First Nations throughout the course of several years and will remain willing to engage with M&S to understand their concerns and seek solutions. A new Statistics Canada report looks at the well-being of Indigenous children in this country and how they stack up against other ethnicities. Using data from the 2022 Indigenous Peoples Survey, the report focuses on children aged 1 to 14 years old who are First Nation, living off reserve, Métis, or Inuit. Our Sav Jonesa has more.
It found that 69% of Indigenous children have excellent or very good mental health as reported by their parents. For non-Indigenous children, that number is 86%, according to a Canadian health survey from 2019. Almost a third of parents of Indigenous children reported insufficient household income to cover household needs like housing and food. The number is highest among Inuit at 43% and 27% of Métis and 23% of First Nations living off reserve. Food insecurity affected more than 2/5 of Indigenous children, with 14% missing meals or going without food. Inuit children were the most food insecure. Food insecurity affects less than 1/5 of non-Indigenous children, according to the data. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new agreement is in place to help Mi'kmaq respond to emergency situations. Details on that and much more coming up after the break. Welcome back. Mi'kmaq chiefs in Nova Scotia met with the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services, Jenica Atwin, and Senator Aaron Prosper in Millbrook First Nation, just north of Halifax, on Wednesday. They announced a funding agreement of $2.4 million over 5 years to the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. The money will help support 8 emergency coordinators in 8 communities. They will assess the needs of each community to prepare and respond to emergency events, such as wildfires, hurricanes, floods, and snowstorms, all of which are becoming more and more frequent. One chief said each community needs a full team for emergency response in case they are isolated, such as what happened during the COVID lockdowns. But Chief Bob Gloat of the Millbrook First Nation said this is a start of what's needed.
And that's what we need to be able to continue to do, is build that capacity, build that training, build that knowledge of what is needed in our communities, because each natural disasters that's been happening several times a year does have a significant impact, and it's a cleanup and restoration, and that needs to be able to is ongoing, and that working relationship.
A First Nation in Northern Ontario is putting out an urgent call to the federal government to cover a $20 million shortfall in its campaign to build a new elders' home. The current home in Wickwemicong unceded territory was built in 1972, and officials there say the structure is no longer viable. The community is concerned that if a new facility cannot be built, elders will be forced to relocate to other facilities across Ontario. A grassroots fundraising campaign has managed to raise more than $2 million, while calls for continued for a meeting with the federal government. A spokesperson for Indigenous Services Canada states that the department is working with Wickwemicong and the Ontario government to explore funding options. Meanwhile, Ontario is extending the home's current operating license while the community continues to seek funding.
We are attempting to secure a meeting with the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada. We've been trying for the last 6-8 weeks to secure this meeting. It hasn't happened yet. We're even going as far as reaching out to the Prime Minister's office as well, because this is a crisis. This is a critical area for the elders of our community and neighboring communities. And it's a crisis that needs to be solved, and we're really calling on the federal government to support us.
A Puckatawagan man and his family walked more than 100 kilometers in the scorching heat after their train home was canceled at the last minute. We'll hear from John Colomb after the break. Welcome back. Here's a look at your current conditions. Sunny and 21 in Fredericton, 22 under the sun in Halifax. Smoky and 20 for Kuujjuaq. Cloudy and 11 in Nain. Cloudy and 24 in Montreal. Sun's out and 26 in Val-d'Or. Sunny skies and 21 in Sault Ste. Marie. 23 under the sun in North Bay. Sunny and 23 in Thunder Bay. Cloudy and 22 in Sioux Lookout. Smoky and 19 in Puckatawagan, cloudy and 20 for Norway House. 19 in Winnipeg and Dauphin, cloudy and 20 in Brandon. Smoke and 18 for Regina, smoky and 19 in Saskatoon. Smoky in Meadow Lake and La Ronge with highs of 17 right now. In northern Alberta, cloudy and 19 in High Level, showers and 21 in Fort Chipewyan. 23 with rain in Edmonton, smoky and 29 in Medicine Hat. 23 in Vancouver, showers and 33 in Kamloops. 23 with showers in Prince George, cloudy and 21 in Smithers. 20 in Old Crow, Beaver Creek, and Whitehorse. 13 and rain in Yellowknife, sunny and 22 in Norman Wells. 13 in Sax Harbor, 23 in Paulatuck. 9 in Chesterfield, cloudy and 13 in Whale Cove. 5 in Resolute, 9 in Joe Haven. A Puckatawagan man is speaking out after he and his wife and nephew walked 100 kilometers to get home. John Colomb and his family walked in the blistering heat for 2.5 days after their train ride home was canceled at the last minute. And it's not the only time it's happened, says the leadership of Matthias Kalom Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. They're calling for the immediate improvement in customer service and more empathy from the three of the northern Manitoba railroad companies. Creason spoke with John Kalom on Wednesday.
Thank you for joining us, John. Can you tell us what led up to you deciding that you would just walk home?
I'd say it was brought on by the number of times that our train has been canceled in the past 4 or 5 years. It's been progressing to where it's becoming normal, maybe not to have a train every 2 weeks. They cancel one, and in that one day cancel, everything gets thrown out of, the wheel doesn't turn properly, like our construction that's happening at the school, our water treatment plant, our lift station, everything that's being built in our community, it gets affected. Not only that, children go hungry. There's families here that depend on that train. They have their groceries shipped to them through that train. All our essential supplies that we need to keep ourselves alive during our life. When we get up in the morning, everything that has to do with living comes on that train. So in my mind, I thought to myself, hey, why are we just sitting back? Why are we letting this become a normal activity? Or why is it such it's so easy for them to say, well, we're going to cancel the train on you today without any recourse, without any thought for the community itself, for the well-being of the community. They just sweep that aside and say, well, that's okay, it's only puck. You know, it's that mindset that told me, well, here, John, you need to do something. Somebody's got to get up and say something. Somebody's got to try and show something to the outside world to see exactly how the railway company that operates our train treats our community. Like we're nothing, like that dust bunny under the couch that builds there and forgotten about. Nobody sweeps it. And
yeah, no, such a huge disservice and such an important lifeline for you and everybody else there. What was that journey like? It's been very hot these past days. There's been fires up around that way.
Oh yeah. It was such a roller coaster ride in our mind. It was 1 minute we'd be way up here saying, okay, we can do this, 15 minutes later, we're suffering. Our feet are hurting. The heat is beating down on us. We're trying to keep hydrated using beaver pond water just to cool ourselves off. At one point during the second day, we ran out of water for about 4.5 hours or something like that. And my wife was dehydrating. My nephew was the first one to start throwing up. He started saying, I got a headache, I feel sick. And not long after that, my wife started feeling sick as well. And then I started feeling sick. I threw up in front of them. And I encouraged them, don't give up. Let's keep moving. If we sit here, this is where we're going to perish here if we don't keep moving. Let's find a cool spot to sit. The railroad crew is about 7-8 miles ahead of us here. Let's try and cover as much space to get to them, I told them. So yeah. That was the hardest part of the trip, was when we ran out of water.
Wow.
When we had the supplies, when we had our water, when we had our food, you know, we no problem. The only thing that was bothering us was the heat. This is like walking in the desert, you know, it was very hot. Some of the videos I took, you could actually see the heat rising off up the tracks. Yeah. You could just see it. You could just see it.
No, I believe it. Matthias Kalom Cree Nation Chief Gordy Bear laid out some of the concerns in a recent press release, including a lack of support for vulnerable passengers, a dismissive attitude to complaints are among them. What are some of your concerns with rail service in the area? You talked about it there. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I guess the other thing I'd like to add is the rail service going up north towards Lynn Lake is non-existent this year because of construction happening by Manitoba Hydro. They're fixing their dam or something. So they're not allowing my family and a few other families that access that side of our country to use the track. They're telling us that we can't be traveling on there because they're hauling stuff. And that to me is a direct attack on my rights as a First Nation person to be able to access my traditional lands, to do my harvesting, my medicine harvesting, my hunting, my berry picking, everything that a native, does. We're not allowed to do that because of the construction, because of HBR hauling equipment for Manitoba Hydro. We're totally cut off.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to leave it there, John. We wish you all the best on your journey there, and thank you for chatting with us today. Okay,
can I say something? I'd like to thank the ladies that came out to meet us. The ladies, their names are Sandra Hart, Margaret Linklater, and Sunshine Moore. They made that trek 15 miles out of the community here, pulling 50, 80-pound wagons with their supplies just to try and come and, to encourage us, to keep us going. They also walked home into the community with us. And also my brother Roy Colomb and Leonard Hart were coming out there with quads to bring us supplies such as water, food, tent, blankets. They were, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have made our journey. And I want to make special mention to my nephew. They called him 18-year-old nephew. His name is Wawatu Colomb. Good job, my nephew.
What a journey. Thanks to John for sharing that. That is all the time we have for your first look at the day's news. Of course, we'll have much more for you tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can stay up to date with the latest by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here in a couple of hours. Have a great afternoon.